The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I was already in bed, reading, when I saw the number. Seattle area code, unknown caller. Hello? Is this Madison Turner? A woman's voice. Clipped. Professional. Yes, this is she. Miss Turner, this is Amanda Chen from First Pacific Title Company. I apologize for calling so late, but we received an urgent request regarding the property at 2847 Pine Street, Unit 402. We need to verify some information before we can proceed. My heart stopped. That was my condo. The one I'd owned outright for 6 years. The one my husband David thought we were renting. What kind of request? I asked, sitting up slowly, careful not to wake David beside me. A request to add a second name to the title. The caller identified herself as Patricia Morgan and said she was acting on behalf of her son, David Morgan, the current resident. She indicated you'd discussed this arrangement and that she has power of attorney to facilitate the transfer. I felt ice water in my veins. We'd been married exactly 3 weeks. That's not correct, I said, keeping my voice steady. No such discussion has taken place, and no such transfer has been authorized. This is my property. Solely mine. There was a pause. I see. The caller was quite insistent. She even had your address, date of birth, and social security number. How did she get my social security number? I whispered, glancing at David's sleeping form. That's what concerned us enough to call, Amanda said. Identity theft is serious. We wanted to verify directly with you before we filed a police report. I told her I'd come to their office first thing in the morning. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to David breathe. I should probably explain how I got here. My name is Madison Turner. I'm 63 now, but this story begins when I was 34. I'd been a tech consultant for a decade by then, specializing in cybersecurity for healthcare companies. The work was demanding but lucrative. When I was 28, my grandmother passed away and left me $200,000. Combined with my savings, I had enough for a down payment on a condo in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. I paid it off in 5 years. Every extra dollar went toward that mortgage. By 33, I owned it free and clear. $450,000 worth of real estate, all mine. My name on the title, my credit, my sweat, my grandmother's legacy. I'd also been a single mother since my daughter Emma was born. Her father disappeared when I told him I was pregnant. I never even tried to track him down for child support. I didn't need his money, and I definitely didn't need his drama. Emma was 5 when I met David Morgan at her school's spring carnival. He was her kindergarten teacher. He had kind eyes and a gentle way with the kids. He made Emma laugh. That mattered to me more than anything. We started dating that summer. David was 36, had never been married, lived in a small rental near the school. He made $48,000 a year, which in Seattle barely covered rent and student loans. He was honest about his finances. Said he was still paying off his master's degree in education. I didn't care about the money. I'd made my own. What I cared about was whether he'd be good to Emma, and he was. He was wonderful to her. 8 months later, he proposed at the same carnival where we'd met. Emma was thrilled. I said yes. That's when things got complicated. David's mother, Patricia Morgan, was a retired investment banker. She'd worked for 30 years at a major firm in Portland before retiring to Seattle to be closer to David. She lived in a high-rise downtown and made it very clear she thought her son had married beneath him the first time he seriously dated someone, except David hadn't been married before. This was his first serious relationship since college. She'd smiled at me at family dinners, complimented my work, asked about my tech background, but there was always a sharpness underneath, like she was evaluating my worth. 2 months before the wedding, David suggested he move into my place. It makes sense, he said. We're getting married anyway, and my lease is up next month. This way we can save money. He thought I was renting. I'd never corrected him. When we'd first started dating, he'd asked if I owned or rented, and I'd just said, I've got a place in Capitol Hill. He'd assumed rental because that's what most people our age had in Seattle. I'd let him assume. Why? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe because I'd watched too many friends go through ugly divorces. Maybe because my lawyer friend, Rachel, had told me horror stories about asset division. Maybe because something in Patricia's eyes when she looked at me made me want to keep one card close to my chest. So I'd said, sure, move in. And I'd created a fake lease agreement, printed it out, even listed a fictional landlord's name. I'd told David the landlord was old-fashioned and wanted rent paid by check, which I'd deposit into a separate account. He'd believed it completely. We got married in August. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Patricia wore white. She'd said it was an accident, that she'd bought the dress before she knew my color scheme. I'd let it go. The first week of marriage was blissful. David was attentive, loving. Emma adored him. He'd tuck her in at night and read her stories in different voices. I'd stand in the hallway and listen and think, I made the right choice. The second week, Patricia started calling. David, honey, I've been thinking about your living situation, she'd said on speakerphone while I was making dinner. That rental you're in, have you thought about buying something? I could help with a down payment. Mom, we're fine where we are, David had said, glancing at me. But you're throwing money away on rent, and that neighborhood. Capitol Hill is so transitional. I'd gritted my teeth. Capitol Hill was one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Seattle. We like it here, Patricia, I'd said. Oh, Madison, I'm sure you do. But you have to think long-term. Build equity. I've been in finance my entire career. I know these things. She'd called 3 more times that week with the same topic, each time more insistent. David started to look stressed. The third week, she showed up at our door without calling first. Surprise, she'd announced, walking past me with shopping bags. I brought some things to brighten up the place. The walls are so bare. She'd proceeded to hang paintings, rearrange furniture, and measure windows for curtains, all without asking. Patricia, I'd said, trying to stay calm. I appreciate the thought, but we're happy with how things are. Nonsense. A man's home should reflect his status. David is an educated professional. This place should look like it. A man's home, not our home, his home. I'd caught her in the bedroom later, opening drawers. Just looking for a tape measure, she'd said, not even embarrassed. That night, David and I had our first real argument. You need to set boundaries with your mother, I'd said. She's just trying to help, he'd replied. She's rearranging our home without permission. She was going through our drawers, David. She's not used to me being married. Give her time to adjust. I'd dropped it. But I'd also changed the locks the next day. Told David we'd had a break-in attempt in the building. He'd believed me. Patricia called the following Monday. Could she have a key? For emergencies? The building manager has an emergency key, I'd said. But what if something happens to David and I need to get in? Then you call 911 and they'll get in. She'd gone quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. You don't trust me. It's not about trust. It's about privacy. She'd hung up. Didn't call for 3 days. Then she'd called David at work and suggested we all meet for dinner. To clear the air. At dinner, she'd been charming. Apologetic. Said she'd overstepped. Bought Emma a present. Held my hand across the table. I just want my son to be happy, she'd said, tears in her eyes. And secure. You understand that, don't you, Madison? A mother's concern? I'd nodded. Wanted to believe her. The next week, she'd called during the day when David was at work. Madison, I wanted to apologize again, she'd said. And to make it up to you, I'd like to help. I know a wonderful interior designer. She could really maximize your space, and I'd pay for it. My treat. That's very generous, Patricia, but we're really fine. Please, let me do this. For David. He's been stressed about money, and I want him to feel comfortable in his home. His home. Again. I'll think about it, I'd said, just to end the call. She'd called back the next day with the designer's number, and the day after that. By Friday, I'd agreed just to stop the calls. The designer came the following Tuesday. Patricia came with her. They'd measured rooms, discussed paint colors, talked about knocking down walls. Patricia had made decisions without asking me. The designer had nodded along, clearly used to working with wealthy clients who made all the choices. Wait, I'd said when they started talking about renovating the kitchen. We need to get landlord approval for any major changes. Patricia had frowned. The landlord. Right. What's his name? I'll call him myself. Speed things along. I'd prefer to handle it, I'd said. Oh, But I'm happy to help. I've negotiated with dozens of landlords in my career. I know how to get what we need. I'd felt trapped. His name is Mr. Chen. He's very particular about who contacts him. Well, give me his number and I'll charm him, she'd said with a laugh. I'd made an excuse about having the number at work. Said I'd call him myself. The designer and Patricia had left shortly after, but not before Patricia had asked, "What's the square footage here? About 1,200 square feet?" "Something like that," I'd said vaguely. After they'd left, I'd sat on my couch and realized something. She was trying to figure out how much the place was worth. She thought if they rented in this neighborhood, David was paying at least $2,000 a month. Maybe she wanted to help him buy it from the landlord. Maybe she wanted to know if it was a good investment. Or maybe she wanted to know exactly what David was entitled to if things went south. I'd called Rachel that night. "You need to tell him the truth," Rachel had said, "before his mother finds out some other way. What if telling him makes things worse? What if not telling him makes things impossible? Madison, you've been married a month. This is still early enough to claim you were waiting for the right time. Wait much longer and it looks like deliberate deception." She was right. I knew she was right. But then Patricia called the next morning with another helpful suggestion. She'd found a property management company that specialized in lease-to-own arrangements. Would I like their number? Maybe the landlord would be interested? That's when I knew. She wasn't trying to help us. She was trying to get David's name on something. Anything. A lease, a purchase agreement, some legal document that would give him claim to property. I'd started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. Patricia came over twice a week, always with some excuse. Dropping off groceries, bringing Emma a toy, wanting to borrow a book. Each time, she'd linger, ask questions. "How long have you lived here? What did you pay for deposit? Is the landlord local or out of state?" I'd given vague answers. Changed the subject. But she was relentless. Then David came home one day looking uncomfortable. "Mom asked me something weird," he'd said. "What?" "She wanted to know if I'd added you to my bank accounts yet. And if you'd added me to yours." "What did you tell her?" "That we kept our finances separate for now. That we'd combine them eventually." I'd breathed a little easier. We'd opened one joint account for household expenses, but our main accounts were still separate. My accounts, where my salary went, where my property tax payments came from, were mine alone. "She said that was old-fashioned," David continued, "that married couples should share everything. Your mother has opinions about everything." He'd laughed, but it was strained. "She does. But sometimes I wonder if she's right. About the sharing everything part. Shouldn't we be more merged?" I'd felt a chill. "Do you want to merge our accounts?" "I don't know. Maybe? Isn't that what married people do?" "Some do, some don't. We're fine the way we are." He'd nodded, but he'd looked uncertain. And I'd known Patricia had planted that seed of doubt. 2 days later, she'd called David at work again. I knew because he'd come home looking stressed. "Mom wants to take us to dinner Saturday," he'd said. "She has something she wants to discuss." "What kind of something?" She wouldn't say. Just that it's important. About our future. I'd had a bad feeling. A very bad feeling. Saturday came. We'd met Patricia at an expensive steakhouse downtown. She'd ordered wine, made small talk, asked about Emma, everything normal. Then, over dessert, she'd pulled out a folder. "I've been doing some research," she'd said, smiling, "and I think I've found a solution to your housing situation." She'd slid papers across the table. A real estate listing, a house in the suburbs, 3 bedrooms, yard, good schools. "It's perfect for a young family," she'd said, "and with my help with the down payment, you could afford it easily. I've already spoken to my financial advisor. I can gift you both the money, tax-free." David had lit up. "Mom, this is incredibly generous. I just want you to have security. A real home, not some rental in the city." I'd looked at the listing. The house was in Bellevue, far from David's school, far from my office, and it was $420,000. "Patricia, this is very kind," I'd said carefully, "but we haven't discussed buying a house yet." "Well, you should. You're throwing away money every month on rent. We're comfortable where we are, for now." "But what about Emma? Don't you want her to have a yard, a neighborhood with other children?" Emma went to a school with a great program. She had friends. She was happy. "We'll think about it," David had said, looking at me hopefully. I'd nodded noncommittally. But Patricia had seen something in my face, some resistance she hadn't expected. After dinner, in the car, David had been excited. "We should at least look at it, right? I mean, Mom's offering to help. That's huge." "It's in Bellevue," I'd said. "You'd have an hour commute each way. But Emma could have a yard. We could have a real house. We have a real home now." "A rental," I'd almost told him then. Almost said, "It's not a rental, it's mine. I own it." But something stopped me. The way he'd said we could have a real house. Like what we had now wasn't real. Wasn't enough. That night, I'd lain awake thinking, if I told him now, he'd be hurt. Confused, why had I lied? But if I didn't tell him, Patricia would keep pushing, keep trying to get David's name on property, keep undermining what we had. And then that phone call came. 11:30 on a Tuesday night. Patricia trying to add David's name to my title without my knowledge. The next morning, I'd gone to the title company. Amanda Chen had shown me the paperwork Patricia had submitted, a forged power of attorney, my signature, my social security number. "How did she get this information?" I'd asked. "I was hoping you could tell me." I'd thought about it. The designer visit, Patricia measuring rooms, going through drawers. She must have found something. A tax document, a bank statement, something with my social security number on it. "This is identity fraud," Amanda had said. "We need to file a police report." "Wait," I'd said. "Give me 24 hours. To talk to my husband first." She'd agreed reluctantly. Said the paperwork wouldn't be processed regardless. But I needed to act fast. I'd called Rachel from my car. "You need to tell him everything," she'd said. "Today, right now, before Patricia does. What if he sides with her? Then you know where you stand." "But Madison, she just committed a felony. This isn't about hurt feelings anymore. This is about protecting yourself." I'd driven to David's school, pulled him out of a staff meeting. His face had gone white when I'd told him. "My mother did what?" "She tried to add your name to the condo title. Forged paperwork. Used my social security number." "That's impossible." "She wouldn't." "David, I have the documents. The title company called me last night." He'd sat down heavily. "Why would she do that? We're just renting." And there it was. The moment I'd been dreading. "We're not renting," I'd said quietly. "I own the condo. I've owned it for 6 years. I bought it before we met. It's paid off. It's mine." The look on his face. Confusion. Then understanding. Then betrayal. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumption." "That's the same thing, Madison. Why would you—" He'd stopped, shaken his head. "Does my mother know?" "I don't think so. But she suspected something. That's why she's been asking so many questions. That's why she tried to access the title. This is insane. All of it. My mother committing fraud. My wife owning property I didn't know about. What else haven't you told me?" "Nothing. Just this." He'd stood up. "I need time to think. About all of this." He'd left the school. Didn't come home that night. Stayed at Patricia's. I'd barely slept. What if I'd lost him? What if this secret had destroyed everything? The next morning, my doorbell rang. I'd opened it to find 2 police officers. "Mrs. Morgan?" one had asked. "Yes? We need to ask you some questions about a complaint that's been filed. Regarding property fraud?" My stomach had dropped. But then the officer had continued. "Your mother-in-law, Patricia Morgan, has filed a complaint claiming you've forged documents to steal property from her son. She's alleging you've deceived him about the ownership of your residence." I'd stood there, stunned. She was trying to turn this around on me. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you'll give me a moment, I can show you the actual documents." I'd brought out everything. My original purchase agreement from 6 years ago. My title, my property tax records, all in my name, dated long before I'd even met David. The officers had looked through everything, then looked at each other. "Ma'am, do you have documentation of the attempt by Mrs. Morgan to alter these records?" I'd shown them the forged power of attorney, explained about the title company's call. One officer had let out a low whistle. "This is identity theft and attempted fraud. We'll need to take a statement." They'd been there for 2 hours. Taking notes? Photographing documents. By the time they'd left, they'd said Patricia would be contacted for questioning. David had come home that evening. He'd looked exhausted. "The police called me," he'd said. "Told me what Mom did. What she tried to do." "I'm sorry," I'd said. "Why are you sorry? You didn't do anything wrong." He'd sat down on the couch. "My mother tried to steal from you, tried to forge legal documents. And then when she got caught, she tried to accuse you of the exact thing she'd done." David. "And I believed her at first. When she called me yesterday crying, saying you'd tricked me, that you'd stolen property, I believed her. I should have believed you." He'd put his head in his hands. I'd sat down next to him. "I should have told you about the condo from the beginning." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was scared. I'd worked so hard for it, paid it off by myself, and I'd seen too many friends lose everything in divorces. I just wanted one thing that was completely mine." "You thought I'd try to take it?" "No. But I thought if things went wrong, it might get complicated. And then I met your mother, and something about the way she looked at things, at money, at property, it made me want to keep this one card close." He'd been quiet for a long time. Then he'd said, "My mother has always been about status, about appearances. When I told her I wanted to be a teacher, she was horrified. Teachers don't make money. They don't have prestige. She spent years trying to convince me to go into business. When I finally moved out here, away from her, she acted like I'd betrayed her." "She loves you," I'd said. "She loves who she wants me to be. But I'm not that person. I'm a teacher who makes $48,000 a year and drives a 10-year-old Civic, and I'm happy, or I was, until she started making me feel like I wasn't enough." "You are enough." "Am I? I moved into your condo, your property, that you paid for. Doesn't that make me?" "It makes you my husband, who I chose, who I love. The property doesn't change that, but it changes things, doesn't it? You have all this, and I have nothing." "That's not true. You have your career, your education, your relationship with Emma. Those aren't nothing." He'd looked at me. "I felt like such an idiot when you told me, like everyone must have been laughing at me, the poor teacher living in his wife's condo, thinking he's paying rent. No one is laughing. No one even knows except Rachel. And she told me from the beginning I should tell you. I just need to understand why. Really understand." So I'd told him. About my grandmother's legacy, about paying off the mortgage alone, about every extra shift, every penny saved, about how proud I'd been when I'd made that final payment, about how it was the first thing I'd ever owned completely. And I'd told him about my fear, not of him, but of losing it, of having to divide it, of it being taken away. "My father lost everything in his divorce from my mother," I'd said. "She got the house, the cars, half his retirement. He ended up in a studio apartment at 50 years old. I watched him struggle for years, and I swore I'd never let myself be that vulnerable." David had taken my hand. "I'm not your father, and you're not your mother." "I know. But trauma doesn't care about logic." We'd talked until after midnight, about trust, about fear, about what marriage meant when people came in with such different resources. And we'd talked about his mother. "She's not going to accept this," he'd said. "Any of it." "I know. She's going to push for us to move, to buy that house she found, to do things her way." "I know. And if I don't go along with it, she's going to cut me off." "Would that be so bad?" I'd asked gently. He'd thought about it, really thought about it. Then he'd said, "No, maybe it wouldn't." Patricia was questioned by police the following week. She'd admitted to accessing my documents but claimed she'd thought she was protecting her son. The district attorney had decided not to press charges given her age and the fact that no actual fraud had been completed. But she'd been issued a formal warning. She'd called David once after that, demanded he divorce me, claimed I'd manipulated him. When he'd refused, she'd hung up. That was 4 months ago. She hasn't called since. David goes to therapy now, working through things, the relationship with his mother, the money dynamics in our marriage, his own feelings of inadequacy. It's slow, but he's doing the work. We're still in my condo. I've offered multiple times to put his name on the title. He's refused. "This is yours," he says. "You earned it. I respect that." Instead, we've opened a joint savings account, working towards something we'll build together, maybe a vacation home someday, maybe a business. Something that belongs to both of us equally. Emma asks sometimes why Grandma Patricia doesn't visit anymore. We tell her that sometimes families need space, that it's okay for relationships to change. She seems to accept that. I ran into Patricia once at a grocery store downtown. She'd looked right through me, walked past without a word. I'd felt relief more than anything else. Rachel says I should have told David from the beginning, that I got lucky it worked out. She's probably right. But I also think I knew, on some level, that this would happen, that Patricia would try something, and that secret, that one thing that was completely mine, might be the thing that saved me. Because here's what I learned. Protecting yourself isn't the same as not trusting your partner. It's about not trusting circumstances, not trusting other people's motives, not trusting that the world will be fair or kind. I trusted David. I still do. But I didn't trust his mother. And I was right not to. Some people say I manipulated the situation, that I should have been honest from day one. Maybe they're right. But I also know that if David had known about the condo from the beginning, Patricia would have known. And she would have found a way to get her hands on it much earlier, before I'd understood what I was dealing with. The secret wasn't about David. It was about protecting myself from someone I didn't even know was a threat yet. My instincts told me to wait, to see, to understand who I was really dealing with before I laid all my cards on the table. Those instincts saved me, saved my home, saved my grandmother's legacy, and ultimately, they saved my marriage. Because David saw his mother's true nature, saw what she was willing to do, and he chose me, chose us, chose the life we'd built. If I'd told him from the beginning and she'd immediately started demanding he get his share, he might have been caught in the middle, pulled between his mother and his wife, unsure of what was right. But this way, her actions spoke for themselves. She'd committed fraud, she'd tried to steal, and then she'd tried to blame me for her own crimes. There was no ambiguity, no room for manipulation. So yes, I kept a secret, a big one. But that secret protected something that took me years to build, and in the end, it protected my marriage too. I tell Emma, when she's older and asks about relationships, about money, about trust, protect yourself first. Love doesn't require vulnerability to the point of stupidity. Love doesn't mean handing over everything you've worked for. Love means building something together while also maintaining your own foundation. And I tell her, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. If someone is asking too many questions, there's probably a reason. If you feel the need to protect something, protect it. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for self-preservation. I'm 63 now. David and I are still together, still in that condo. We paid off his student loans last year with the money from our joint account. We travel twice a year. Emma is 29 and getting married next summer. She's already bought her own condo, paid for it herself. When her fiancé asked about moving in, she said, "Sure, but you should know it's mine." I've never been prouder. Patricia sends a card every Christmas, never signs it, just a generic holiday message. David throws them away without opening them. He sees her sometimes, from a distance, at community events. She never approaches, never speaks. He says he feels nothing when he sees her, not anger, not sadness, just nothing. That's probably the saddest part of this story. A mother who loved control more than she loved her son, who valued property over people, who couldn't accept that her son had built a life on his own terms, even if those terms didn't match her version of success. But it's not my story to mourn. It's David's, and he's made his peace with it. As for me, I'm at peace too. I made choices that some people might judge, but they were my choices, my property, my life, and I'd make the same choices again in a heartbeat. Because the truth is, sometimes saving yourself looks like keeping secrets. Sometimes protecting what's yours means not sharing it right away. Sometimes love means setting boundaries before you even know they'll be tested. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for your marriage is make sure you have something left if it all falls apart. I hope it never does. But if it did, I'd still have my condo, my foundation, the thing my grandmother gave me, the thing I built, the thing I kept. And that's not selfish. That's smart. That's survival. That's exactly what any woman should do.